lockdown, and possibly it's something that some people have been feeling, but also possibly something that has got a little concealed or probably dampened down for good reason. This quality of upeka, no, the quality of mudita, of joy. And I think it's really interesting that the Buddha placed this joy within the 4 Brahma Viharas, within the 4 divine abodes, and it's the least talked about. And I think because it's not really seen as something so sort of important or functional, I think that we can all, you know, or necessary in a sense. Like we can all think, yeah, well, loving kindness is important and compassion is important, and yeah, it's really important to find steadiness when the shit's on, you know, when I'm on the edge of my life. It's important to be able to settle down and resource myself. But this quality of joy and mudita that the Buddha said in this in these 4 qualities is equally needed to bring ourselves to fruition, and to also continue to persist in engaging in life with our eyes wide open. And I think joy is sort of interesting because it's more, in a sense, random. It's surprising. It can usually more bubble up when we're relaxed. You know, it's hard when we're feeling very serious to allow that quality. It said that it can bring a lightness and a deftness to actually make our actions more direct and clear and helpful. And I remember a lot, like when I was first practicing a lot in India and wandering around the Ganga and those riverbanks, and sometimes just walking past a person sort of randomly, you know, or you'd walk past sadhus or different people practicing with this brightness in the eyes, and would just look at me with this sort of nod of the head and this sort of big smile, and this kind of charge would come through. It was like, I just regard you, not because of what you do or what you've achieved or where you are, but just because you're existing, just because you are here. And the sort of the wiggle of the head and the response, and it was almost like a tequila shot of recognition of just life, and just the power of that. And it's the same in the sort of namaste where you bow down. It's like the Brahma Viharas are trying to cut through to restore our connection and our dignity again. So the joy is sort of one way that can really aerate density, you know, that we can get stuck in. You know, it's like a nudge in the ribs, or a sort of giggle under your fear, or when you're feeling most sort of hopeless, or that you're, you know, in a really sort of heavy state, momentarily eclipsed by some doubt or you know, about yourself, and something comes in and just nudges you. You know, it's almost like the surprise of a flock of birds leaving trees, and just it's somehow when we're relaxing and we're open to the wider environment around us that this quality can come. The joy it's said to relieve the sort of intensity of compassion and of feeling deeply, that the Buddha's words can sometimes go into a melancholic overwhelm, that we get so overwhelmed by kind of life that it weakens our own mind. And it said, so it can, our minds can sort of become consumed by sort of worries, and joy can sort of just cut through that. It's also said that it can take out, it sort of, the Buddha says sometimes we have this futile sentimentality that we're feeling so much all the time, that we get so heavy that we can't act anymore. And so we lose that creative impulse that joy so often can bring in. And I think it's when the Brahma Viharas, it said when they arise in us, when we really feel that warmth or a sense of calm, or the movement of care for another, and joy, that they give strength, and that they are strength and they also give strength. So it's like we kind of charge each other back up into our capacity. like again, that sort of tequila shot, that it's not pitying, it's not patronizing, it's really regarding the knots of each other, and where we all get kind of hung up and still sort of like peeling back the kind of cloaks that come around us to sort of free up our nature again. And when someone does that for us, where they sort of are willing to sort of like come in and kind of like help us come back to something essential, it's very powerful feeling. It's like, whoa, yeah, I was really fixed in something there. And I think the first thing when stress starts to come into our bodies, and particularly like this sort of time where stress comes in, things start to feel very serious, and like then that stress breeds more serious. Stress is the first thing where we get fixated, and we can lose that capacity just to delight in, a leaf or a bird wing or what actually that nourishes us so much. And this slowing down and unwinding to be able to receive the life around us, to feel ourselves just receiving colors and, this sort of astonishing gift that we have of being here. And I think it's sometimes because I think what the Buddha was so powerful and potent in his teachings is that he was so sort of, we could say, relentless in looking at suffering. He was like, there's no escape. Again, this thing like adversity is my friend. Yeah, this is what we're going to work with. We work with uncertainty. Yet we work with feeling one thing in the morning, one thing in the afternoon. We work with losing people that we love. We work with things totally not going our way or the way we thought, and having to do a kind of backflip, and our whole life takes another direction. The randomness of life, the Buddha almost sort of, he pressed into so deeply, and the suffering of what it is when we get in constricted states of mind that really tighten us up. The pain, it's like he had a howl about that. His compassion for how we get caught up and our being gets in knots was like profound. And sometimes it's sort of seen, because there's all this talk of suffering, life is suffering, that the teaching is very depressive, like a full-on downer. But the thing is that it's through that suffering, through opening to our grief, through opening to our fear, to losing our fear of it, that it can move in and move through and give this space for beautiful joy. Like I said, we have the flames and we have the ashes. And it's so interesting that he put this joy in, how important it is. And I think that they're looking now at the sense of play in the being and creativity, and how much it can change our neural pathways, to be able to have like a lighter moment. How potent kind of play is, how potent joy is as an entry point, how potent it is to let our sort of ourselves be useless sometimes, not all this pressure. And then what can kind of come from that? This trust in our basic nature, that something emerges that's intelligent. So we could say these times when we are under some stress, we can get a little bit more frozen. I notice that in myself. I wonder if you do too. When we're in a restricted state mind, we freeze a little. And this other response to difficulty, to be able to tend and to befriend and to meet that. So, yeah. I think it's a beautiful time where we are not so enmeshed in the consumer consumption kind of culture, where we are in the kind of like the brakes are on, to be able to start to know, what is this nourishment that comes from internal, that doesn't cost anything? It's so democratic, that kind of nourishment. What is it to like fall in and settle into our own being? You know, and the Buddha had that radical moment in his life where his whole teaching turned around, because for a long time he was practicing in such a hardcore way with little joy. Yeah. When he was practicing totally negating the body, such a fierce will, you know, until he just got so exhausted. And it's a famous story, and we all know that feeling where we've just been at it so intensely, and then your ego just gets so sick of itself, of its efforts, you just kind of like plonk. And that happened to him, and he sat down and he remembered sitting under as a boy, sitting under the rose apple tree, and he just felt that ease again, just a human being, unpressured. And it was that moment he had the entry point. He fell in to these very deep places. He fell into those jhanas, and he experienced that sukha. He experienced some sukha. So this happiness for no reason, like rising in him. And a natural dignity. Just checking our timing. They're short Dharma talks now, you know. So he freaked out. He actually freaked out in that moment. He was like, "Oh my gosh, is this okay? Is this okay for me to be feeling this pleasure in my practice? Is this okay to me to be feeling this joy?" He had an inquiry, and he looked into it. He said, "Oh my gosh, this is so important. This is actually necessary. This pleasure, this happiness is something to cultivate. This is going to help me be of service to others, you know? Don't need to cut off my own life force to then be of service. And what's our responsibility to keep that life force alive? To put in our days some time of that kind of play through this time. Like, what do you need to do to sort of instill that? Because I think it's something that also needs to be fed, and it happens in a surprising way. I was just at probably like many of you, the refuge of nature in this time. Like the profound refuge in nature to help settle us as a human being, to be in relationship, that which isn't constructed, that which isn't performing, that which is just wildly itself. You know, like, and the other day I was sort of digesting lockdown again, like, oh, you know, digesting my own self. I live alone. Yeah, there's interactions I would love to be having now that I can't, you know, and we're all on different levels of this. And I was like, oh, okay, going back in. I was sitting by the river, down by the Merry Creek, but where it fattens out and it's big and gorgeous and brown. And thank God and Goddess for the nature in Melbourne, hey, you know, to take resource in. And I was sitting by the river and I was drinking some tea and I was just digesting this time. Okay, yeah, back to retreat for me, you know. That's all right, I'm used to it. Cool. Drinking my tea, and then the lid fell off, and the lid fell into the water. And there's two people close by. I think they were dealing with lockdown. They were drinking whiskey hidden in cappuccino cups. I was like, oh, I could tell, right? They looked at me, they said, "You'll risk your," and I was about to jump in, but it was like quite a slope. But I was like, I fucking want my lid. I don't want to lose another water bottle. So I was just sitting on the bank. I bought this one for yatras. Usually we'd be at the desert in this time. Yeah, usually I'm at the desert now with people. And so the lid fell in and the woman was like, "Don't risk your life. It's not worth it to get that bottle." And the guy was getting excited, like an adventure was coming, you know. He's like, "Oh, cool, what's going to go on? Is she going to do it or not?" I was like, "Ah." And then she goes, "No, don't risk it, because then we're going to have to save you and die too. And then we're all going to probably get COVID-19 together as we're scrambling, like growing," you know, all this alarm was happening. Then I walked along, it was floating down and I could see it was like 5 meters down. I was coming close. I thought I could go down, like do a stomach roll, get down to the ground and pull it out. Meantime, two other people that I know, Miranda, my sister knows her very well, and her friend walked along, right, with their dog. And they tried to get the dog to get it. I think his name, "Go Charlie, get it." And this beautiful dog like whisked in, blew water all over us. You know, this beautiful fresh life, this joy, dived in and tried to get it, but he couldn't come up with it. So I was like, "I'm doing it." I was like, "Can you please hold my feet?" I said to this stranger, "and hurl me in and I'm going to grab it. And he goes, you sure? I said, yes. So I just needed something like this in this moment. He hurled me in. I grabbed it. I almost fell in, like I was totally free falling off the bank. Shoom, with his beautiful strong arms, wished me up. I had it in my hand. The five of us were cheering in some like strange excitement. And this thing, that metaphor though of letting ourselves fall into something, letting ourselves fall off the bank, this possibility in our practice that we can be held and touch something, again, that's not commodified, that is priceless, that sometimes you might wake up in the middle of the night in practice and there's a clarity to your being, and you know things, you're seeing clearly. There's something so precious about being human that we can forget in that busyness. And this sort of joy, which is also connected, I suppose, to our own sensuality and to play, to be able to move with each other, to not be so fixed, in how I think things are or what I need to do to contribute or what needs to happen, but to allow ourselves to maybe fall into our own deeper source or a sort of belonging, our sort of spiritual roots. And so then we can really feel what is my action now? Is it my expression? Is it sort of art? What do I need to make food for people? How do I care for my neighbors? Or is it a time of non-action? Because I feel like we're in the long game now, like our lives, in our environmental crisis, in the inequities that are really going to keep needing to be addressed. If we can seize this gap for the good for us all. And I think that includes like coming back into daily rhythms that support us, that really do matter, that can kind of bring a quality to our days that I think we see in more cultures that have ritual that move us. There's something to come into that simple that can bring joy, that connection. That moment of the Buddha just resting under the rose apple tree, that I hope you all have moments. My deep wish that in this next time you have moments where you're unmistakably touched by your own heart and your own depth, and that you can be mobilized into action in a way that you've also got your own back, and to find your own authentic way to be in this time and to respond to the heat of the world and to yourself. So joy, mudita, bubbles up. I think it's what we love in children. When we see that openness, it's sort of, we're kind of exposed in our joy, because we're not sort of, what do they say? Like despair looks kind of hot in a leather jacket, like joy is sort of like naive and sort of frivolous, as if you're not being serious or really understanding the full-on dilemmas of the world. But I think the intelligence of joy, and when you see the Buddha sitting there, and he is so cognizant from this dharmic perspective of suffering, and still he has a round belly, and he is like conducting out the depth of his own nature at the same time. And that is an elegance, I think, that we can hold the flower and we can hold the ash, because the negative biasing in our mind is very trained, it's very rooted. And so how do we regenerate ourselves as we keep looking at what is so sort of shocking about our world situation? And I think we can grow something good in this together. And it's beautiful when you see the Buddha enjoying things in some of when you see him really talking about what he's seeing. He's walking through fields and he'll say to his friends, hey, Ananda, do you notice like the beautiful sun on the rice fields in this village? This is a beautiful moment, You see him kind of like savoring these moments of life. Okay. So there we go. I think that's Yeah, and you know, this joy too that the Buddha speaks about, the sympathetic nature of it. I talk about that more another time. That you know, the enemy of this overexcitement, where it's sort of like I've got a big smile over a lot of anxiety, and I'm kind of trying to be joyful, but I'm kind of like terrified, you know. So that joy is not quite this joy. You probably all know that, you know, smiling and your face hurts because you're actually kind of like really distressed or something. Then it's like our practice is to totally welcome that distress, you know, and in the trust of that, trust what's natural in us will arise. And that, you know, the opposite of joy, like this comparing mind, this envy, the kind of like miserliness that we can't really enjoy other people's achievements. And the sympathetic joy, it's like your happiness actually is like making me buzz. It is this sort of feel good together, and it is so good for the limbic brain and you know, shifting states. And we sort of have to practice it a bit sometimes, because we do get in these habitual sort of, yeah, tracks, hey. So sometimes there is a little bit of training the sensations. If we're so used to just noticing what's painful, to start to train also our mind to what's beautiful, you know, to sustain our action, to see the whole picture. Thank you for your listening to the Dharma talk and for your ears. And yeah, really wish you deeply well in this time. And I'm up for any questions if you have any questions.